In 1941, a young engineer named Arthur Young showed Lawrence Bell, the founder of Bell Aircraft, a home movie of his new experimental helicopter design. Larry Bell, as he was called, liked his design so much that he set up shop for Arthur Young in a former Chrysler car dealership in Gardenville, New York. And by 1945, they were making and selling helicopters out of their Niagara Falls Airport facility. And in 1951, a separate helicopter division was created. Larry Bell soon decided to locate that facility in a more centralized part of the country where the weather was more temperate, Fort Worth, Texas, a stone's throw from Hurst. And as they say, the rest is history.
It was all country, a house here or there,
It was 4 or 5 little towns, Hurst, Bedford, Euless, Northwestern Hills. They were just little old towns of roughly 200 people in the right place at the right time. Well, it was all farmland. Roads were all asphalt and sand, 2-lane. It was strictly rural.
We didn't have much of a community when we moved to Hurst. It was just hit and miss. Well, there wasn't but one main street. That was where Bill's mother's grocery store was, on that one. He was the first postmaster. It was very small, but that was the first post office. And it grew from there across the street to another area.
When I first came here, this was all pasture land. My wife and I used to go down Harwood Drive and pick grapes off the side of the road and build jelly, or make jelly out of those.
When we were coming down here, when we first married in April of 1957, we came through Hurst, and I didn't see much of anything here. In fact, I wasn't aware that we were even in a town. And my husband says, "Now, this is the place that I would like to come live later." And I said, "Out here?" And looked around. I didn't see much. I said, "It doesn't look like there's much here to me."
There were practically no houses north of Bedford Euless Road.
There was not just a rural community with 2 grocery stores, and when Bell came in, then that's when it really began to grow, and the boom hit, and that's when the home building began in Hurst in the early 51 or 52 around.
One day, Mr. Bell came over to my dad and he said, "I have an idea for a totally different helicopter than what we're doing here." And he said, "I'm going to try to get something going, and I want you to be with me on it." And out of that came Bell Aircraft Corporation, and my dad was with them all the way till 1952, when he approached my dad and asked him about coming down here and heading up tool design in this plant.
He was able to buy that part of Hurst, what's called South Hurst, which is what we all know as the bottoms. He was able to buy that land for $8 an acre.
All of the area, even where Bell Helicopter is, was a watermelon field, and it was just country.
And so the boom became when he began to hire. The guys that had the skills that he was looking for were right here, within 30 miles of where he was going to build his plant.
I moved to Hurst from Bedford in 1960. Bought a new house in Hurst. I signed on with Bell to work as a dynamics engineer.
Now we've got to have side streets. Now we've got to have grocery stores. Now we've got to have service stations. We've got to have all of the fixings of what a community is about.
The streets were county maintained. If there were streets at all, they were all 2-lane. If you wanted to go to Fort Worth, you had to go down what is now Highway 10, was 183 then, and then the Belknap. And you didn't want to be on that road when Bell Helicopter let their employees, when shift changed, because you couldn't get through.
It was just a helicopter town.
Old Hurst was basically about what's Highway 10 now. It used to be 183, but it was, it got pretty loaded with traffic from Dallas to Fort Worth. And that was way before the airport. So it wasn't the airport, it was just people commuting back and forth from Dallas to Fort Worth for jobs. But it was virtually nothing except the highway and a few stores.
Wasn't much places to shop, so we'd have to go into Fort Worth. If we did any shopping, of course, those days you didn't have a lot of money to shop with.
When we first came to Hurst in 1963, all of the activity was down on Highway 10. There was a shopping mall down there, and there's a Piggly Wiggly and a shoe store.
I can remember probably Hearst Lumber Company being on Highway 10 when we first came out here. And it wasn't too long until they had, I guess Hearst TV was probably there when we came out here or shortly thereafter.
I can remember 1957 when I was 3 years old. I can remember it like yesterday. And I've got very fond memories of that shopping center, being around that store. That center, which is now, I think it's called Fin and Feather, it's a boat store, that whole building. You had the Myers Department Store. You had Woolsworth, which was like a five and dime or that type store. It was Worth Food Mart on the end of the building, which became Piggly Wiggly later on. Just around the corner from the building on the east side was the post office, where Bill Souter was the postmaster, and then just a little bit further up Highway 10 was the city hall, police station. Everything was there on what is now Fire Station 3. Holder Drive is where the old city hall, police station, the whole facility was right there. And then across the street, what is now the pawn shop, was Hearst State Bank. That was Hearst. In 1957, that was Hearst right there, as far as commercial, stuff. And then just down the street was, of course, Bell Helicopter. Of course, that's what built Hearst, was Bell Helicopter coming in here. And then of course, then they started building houses just, right to the north of Bell. All those houses were starting to be built right in the early 50s. And what's strange about this whole thing is Bell Helicopter is actually in Fort Worth. It's real weird but Hearst benefited, the city of Hearst benefited from Bell being there. That's what got everything going. And then Hearst just kind of grew from Highway 10. It just kept moving north.
John Barfield went to work for my dad at Bell. The other little side story is that Herman Smith also ended up working at Bell. Herman at that time, I'm told, was selling real estate, selling homes actually right down here on Pipeline where Simpson and Zelda Street are. So John went down there and they started doing that for a little while on the weekends just to make money.
Herman J. Smith, and he was one smart cookie. Herman said, the money's in the house building. He said, why don't we build a couple? Well, after that, I made a lot more money selling real estate than I did work for Bell.
But they didn't have one thing that they needed, and that was money. And my dad approached John and said, how much did you say you need? And he told him $10,000. My dad said, I got that. I can handle that. And that started it.
Herman started with this real estate, and he started selling houses out on the line out at Bell. And he would give people $50 for referrals. So when we first started building houses, I have quite a flair for liking bright colors and jewel colors and so forth, so I was the decorator. Houses didn't cost that much back then. For $15,000, you could get a really nice home.
May have been John Barfield. He may have bought that pig farm and developed it, and it stunk for months. No, it stunk for years. Wind would get out of the north and get a cold, hard rain, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
On the north side of Pipeline, going east, was the hog farm. And you could smell it. It clear to my house when the wind was up.
Hearst was growing from 1957 to 1967. Hearst had really kicked off, and it had moved to population had moved. Pipeline had developed, and the next big road that was developing was Bedford-Euless Road.
When I first started really paying attention, Bedford-Euless Road was a hot spot. The Shady Oak Shopping Center that, when it first opened, had a Jerry Lewis Cinema Theater in it, had a Safeway store there where Dollar General is now. We had a Piggly Wiggly where, the dance studio is there right behind the Jack in the Box. We had a Gibson store where Stroud's Gym is. I mean, it was a poppin' place.
And we used to have a Gibson store. And at one time we owned 5 Gibson stores, and it was the first discount thing that we used to have, which was great.
Pipeline was very popular in Bedford Euless. After football games and all that, everybody would congregate up to the movie theater, Bel Air Shopping Center, and hang out there for a while. Go to the Pizza Hut, and the Pizza Inn there in the center.
I don't ever remember having a pizza and didn't even know what a pizza was until Pizza Inn opened in that shopping center, and I think that was in 1967 or 8, long in there. And that's the first time I remember eating a pizza or even knowing what it was.
Friday nights after we lost a football game, which is about every week, we would cruise up and down Bedford Euless, and there's a Jack in the Box today on that same corner. But that's where we would congregate. It was old Gibson's store was there in that parking lot, and that's where we would all kind of hang out and just run back and forth all the way up and down the streets.
Bel Air Shopping Center, you would have hundreds of kids from areas all over that would come to Bel Air Shopping Center and take the cruise. You would start at one end, let's say a Bel Air Shopping Center, and they just drive back to the other end and circle and come all the way back and just go back and forth. You know, it was kids, I mean, from Denton, from White Settlement, from all over that would come, because Bel Air was known as a gathering place to meet other people and to hang out.
It was comfortable. It was just a comfortable place. I mean, it was home as best as home ever was.
They decided to build a shopping center there. They wanted to put another Meijer store. The grass kept growing up, so my dad brought some steers in from his farm out in Kaufman. He had a place out in Kaufman at that time. And he brought some steers, and he put a fence up, and he only put, I think, 2 strands of barbed wire. He came to the school. He picked me up, and he said, the cows got out there on Bedford Road. We got to go get your horse, and we got to get the cows put back up. So the city wasn't real happy with him that day, I don't think.
There were some things on Pipeline. Jack Clark's was there. The kids used to hang out there. I think CA's was there at the time.
Jack Clark up here on Pipeline Road at the time, he's a drive-in. So I know a friend of mine, Bob Jones, had Arc Electric Company, and he had a couple of daughters, and they were horse crazy. They had horses, so they'd ride their horse up and order a hamburger or something. Jack Clark got a kick out of that.
We bought our first home in 1966. John Barfield was building homes around down in a new neighborhood around Donna Park Elementary School, which was a pretty new elementary school.
When they started to develop and they'd start the surveys and put the little flags in, those children, my children and their friends, would go down there and pull the flags out, thinking they were going to stop all the development by pulling the flags out. Well, it didn't work.
1969, that's when I came to work here. And Bell was really heavily in supporting the Vietnam War. They were running 3 shifts, 24/7. They were putting out 160 helicopters a month. It's just wall-to-wall helicopters as far as you could see. People living in Southhurst complained about the noise, but that's the goose's laying the golden egg. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have Southhurst.
It seemed like everyone in the church, I grew up at Firsthurst, everyone in the church either worked for the school district or Bell Helicopter.
Hurst was the 3rd largest town in Tarrant County with 20,000 population. The airport hadn't gotten here yet. Airport freeway wasn't built. The 121 going downtown wasn't there. There was Fort Worth, Arlington, and Hurst.
When I moved to Hurst in 1961, there was actually curb and gutter laying where the freeway is now. There was streets that were supposed to be there. And it was the state actually stopped John and Herman and my dad from laying those streets because the freeway was going to come through there.
When I was in high school, Airport Freeway was just being built, and we'd go out there and race cars before it was open. That was, it had the concrete down, but there wasn't any traffic. Nobody, it was closed off, but we'd go in there and we'd race up and down Airport Freeway and see who had the fastest car, and that was in the early 70s.
Actually, the first thing that popped up on the freeway was City Hall. The city of Hurst was smart enough when that freeway came in my opinion, it was a smart move to buy that piece of land that they bought.
It's hard to conceive of the fact that of Airport Freeway not being here. But when I first came here, this was all pasture land.
We used to, all go out in the country and stuff, and we just go out and ride, and on a nice Sunday afternoon. And there was a big old turkey barn, with thousands, it looked to me like thousands. The next thing you know, the airport's coming out there and all the stuff was cleared away. There is no more turkey barn.
Some of the old cotton and wheat farmers up in North Euless and Grapevine were able to sell their properties to an enterprise called Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. And they became overnight millionaires.
The mayor of Fort Worth and the mayor of Dallas, they were just bickering all the time, just a continuous fight. So the mayor of Fort Worth had to have an airport. Dallas had one, so they built one out of Amon Carter. When that was built, I was traveling some for Container Corporation, and if I was going somewhere, I'd get on an airplane in Fort Worth and then land over in Dallas, just up and down. And then they finally got together.
Herman was he was on the board that did the airport, that had to try to get Dallas and Fort Worth to go together. He said it only makes sense that we have this.
So the airport came, and with that came a lot of commerce, a lot of interest. American Airlines left New York and repositioned themselves down here. Everyone else started growing. The whole area just started exploding.
The land where the Northeast Mall is came up for sale, and my dad looked at it and said, "No, that'll never be anything. That's low land. It'll flood. We don't want it." And it turned out to be the Northeast Mall. So, hindsight's 20/20, I guess.
The mall started, they started out, I think, first with like 81 shops, and then grew from there and ended up taking in some homes, and that became a huge news story.
Unfortunately, the city fathers had to go through eminent domain.
They were buying land, buying houses and such, and then some of them didn't want to. And we had members living there, and there were some people that got pinched. But the other side of that was one of the best things that ever happened to Hurst.
For the greater good, they built Northeast Mall, and it has created a great deal of money for Hurst and enabled Hurst on many enterprises, I think, to go with the cash, as it were, from tax money.
Because of Northeast Mall in the area, about 70 to 71% of our sales tax come from non-citizens. So whenever we have a sales tax election, our citizens know we pay 30%, but we get 100% back. And so all of our sales tax elections have passed big time.